After the death of Jesus, fear ruled the streets of Jerusalem. Those who had followed him closely were no longer brave. They hid behind locked doors, not because they doubted his words, but because Rome did not forget faces. Movements were crushed quickly. Leaders were eliminated. Followers were next. Peter felt it more than anyone. Only days earlier, he had sworn loyalty. Then, under pressure, he denied knowing Jesus. 3 times. Before dawn, the shame stayed with him. When Jesus was gone, Peter was no hero. He was a fisherman again, a man carrying regret. Everything changed when the silence ended. The resurrection was not announced with force. It spread through whispers, through encounters, through fear turning into conviction. Peter was the first to stand publicly. In Jerusalem, during a crowded festival, he spoke to people who had seen the crucifixion with their own eyes. He did not accuse them. He explained, calmly, clearly. He spoke of Jesus as someone they had known, someone executed openly, someone now alive. The response shocked everyone. Thousands believed. This was no longer a small group of followers. It was a movement inside the city that had killed its leader. The authorities reacted quickly. Peter and John were arrested, questioned, threatened. By what power do you do this? They asked. Peter answered without hesitation, not with anger, with certainty. We cannot stop speaking about what we have seen and heard. They were released, but watched. Persecution did not stop the movement. It sharpened it. Believers shared food, resources, shelter. There were no buildings yet, no titles, no hierarchy, only conviction. But unity attracted attention. Stephen, one of the first leaders, spoke boldly. Too boldly. He challenged religious authorities directly. They dragged him outside the city and killed him. The crowd approved. Among them stood a man named Saul. He watched, he agreed, and then he acted. Saul hunted believers, house by house, rest by rest. He believed he was protecting God, until the road changed everything. On the way to Damascus, Saul was struck blind. A voice spoke his name, not in judgment, in confrontation. I am Jesus, the voice said. The persecutor became the most unlikely follower. Saul became Paul. From that moment, the movement could no longer be contained in Jerusalem. Paul traveled. He spoke to Jews and Gentiles, to the educated and the forgotten. He wrote letters that crossed borders faster than soldiers. Rome noticed. The church was no longer local. It was spreading across the empire, and persecution was just beginning. Rome tolerated many religions. It did not tolerate threats. At first, the followers of Jesus seemed insignificant. A small sect within Judaism. No weapons, no army, no ambition for power. But they refused one thing Rome demanded from everyone. They would not call Caesar Lord. That refusal was enough. Under Emperor Nero, suspicion turned into violence. After a great fire consumed much of Rome, blame was needed. The Christians were convenient, unknown, misunderstood, easy to isolate. Arrests began quietly, then publicly. Believers were torn from homes, accused not of crimes, but of belief. Some were executed in arenas. Others were burned alive, as human torches. Their deaths became spectacle. Among them were leaders. Peter was arrested in Rome. The man who once denied Jesus now faced death openly. According to tradition, he asked to be crucified upside down. He did not consider himself worthy to die the same way as his teacher. Paul was imprisoned. He wrote letters from chains, words meant to encourage, not escape. Eventually, he was executed as a Roman citizen, beheaded outside the city. The leaders were gone. The movement did not stop. Christians gathered underground, literally, in catacombs, in homes, in silence. They memorized teachings. They protected texts. They cared for widows and orphans Rome ignored. Faith spread fastest where suffering was deepest. Children grew up knowing loss. Parents buried sons and daughters. Still, they stayed. Rome tried again and again. New emperors, new waves of persecution. Decades passed. Then centuries. Christians were fed to beasts, exiled, imprisoned, publicly humiliated. Yet executions produced witnesses, martyrs. Their deaths raised questions Rome could not answer. Why did these people refuse to renounce their faith? Why did they face death without resistance? Why did they forgive executioners? By the 3rd century, Christians were everywhere. In cities, in villages, in the army, even in imperial households. The empire was cracking under its own weight. Then, something unexpected happened. In the early 4th century, an emperor named Constantine prepared for battle. According to ancient accounts, he saw a symbol in the sky, a cross, and words, "By this sign conquer." He won. Soon after, persecution ended. Christianity moved from forbidden to protected, from hidden to public. The church emerged from the shadows. But a new challenge followed. How does a movement born in suffering survive power? The question would shape the next centuries. When persecution ended, relief spread quickly. For the first time, Christians could gather openly. Churches rose where homes once hid prayers. Symbols once carved in secret appeared in public spaces. What had survived in whispers now spoke aloud. But freedom brought complexity. The church was no longer a movement on the margins. It now stood close to power, and power always asks questions. Who decides what is true? Who leads? What exactly should be believed? Disagreements surfaced quickly. Different communities understood Jesus differently. Some debated his nature, fully human, fully divine, both. Others argued about authority, scripture, and tradition. To avoid fracture, leaders gathered. In the year 325, bishops from across the empire met in the city of Nicaea. It was unprecedented. Never before had the church spoken with one voice on such a scale. Arguments were intense. Emotions ran high. These were not abstract debates. They shaped identity. The council produced statements meant to unify belief. Creeds, clear language, boundaries. Unity was achieved, but not without cost. Those who disagreed were labeled heretics, exiled, silenced, sometimes persecuted by the same institution that once suffered persecution itself. The church gained structure. Bishops held authority. Councils defined doctrine. Scripture was compiled, copy, preserved. Order replaced improvisation. Christianity spread beyond the Roman world, into Europe, Africa, the Middle East. Missionaries carried faith across borders, adapting to cultures while guarding beliefs. Monasteries emerged, quiet places of prayer and work. While empires rose and fell, monks copied texts, preserved knowledge, protected history. The church became a stabilizing force in a chaotic world. But influence continued to grow. Eventually, bishops in major cities gained exceptional power. One city, Rome, stood above the rest. Its bishop would later be known as the Pope. Authority centralized. With influence came wealth. With wealth came corruption. Politics entered sacred spaces. Power struggles followed. Faith endured, but purity was challenged. Still, the church remained. It baptized kings, crowned emperors, shaped laws, defined morality. For centuries, it was the most powerful institution in the Western world. And yet, beneath the structure, the original question remained. How does a message born among fishermen survive palaces and thrones? That tension would ignite the next great turning point. By the late Middle Ages, the church stood at the center of Europe. It shaped kingdoms. It influenced wars. It controlled education, morality, and law. For many, faith and the church were inseparable. But cracks had formed. Clergy lived in wealth while common people struggled. Positions of authority were bought. Forgiveness was sold through indulgences, pieces of paper promising reduced punishment for sin. The message of grace felt distant. Voices of concern had risen before, but they were silenced. This time would be different. In 1517, a monk named Martin Luther walked to a church door in Wittenberg. He carried a list of arguments, 95 of them, questions meant for debate, not revolution. But the questions spread faster than control. Thanks to the printing press, Luther's words crossed borders within weeks. Ordinary people read them. Kings listened. Scholars argued. Luther challenged authority directly. He questioned the Pope. He insisted that salvation came through faith, not transactions. Scripture, he said, stood above tradition. The church demanded he recant. He refused. Declared an outlaw, Luther survived under protection. He translated the Bible into German, placing Scripture into the hands of the people. Others followed. John Calvin shaped theology in Geneva. Reformers rose across Europe. Some movements were peaceful, others violent. Entire regions broke from Rome. Christianity fractured. What had once been one institution became many traditions. Protestant, Catholic, Reformed, Anglican. Wars followed. Faith mixed with politics. Nations fought over belief. Thousands died. The Catholic Church responded. It reformed internally, clarified doctrine, addressed corruption, strengthened education. This period became known as the Counter-Reformation. Jesuit missionaries traveled the world. Education expanded. Discipline returned to parts of the church. Christianity spread further than ever before. To the Americas, to Africa, to Asia. Yet unity was never restored. The church no longer spoke with one voice. Modernity followed. Science challenged tradition. Revolutions questioned authority. Faith moved from the center of society to its margins. And still, the church remained. Divided, global, ancient and modern at once. From a teacher in Galilee to a worldwide presence, the story continued through conflict, reform, collapse, and renewal. The same question echoed through centuries. How does an ancient message survive a changing world? The answer was still unfolding. Today, the church exists everywhere, in towering cathedrals and in quiet rooms, in cities shaped by faith and in places where belief is questioned. It speaks hundreds of languages. It gathers billions of people, divided by culture, history, and interpretation. It no longer holds unquestioned authority. Science explains what once felt mysterious. Governments stand apart from religion. Faith is personal now, optional, sometimes suspect. Scandals have damaged trust. Abuse of power has left deep wounds. Many have walked away disappointed, angry, or simply unconvinced. And yet, the story has not ended. Every day, people still gather, not because of institutions, but because of meaning. They search for forgiveness, for hope, for something that survives suffering. The church is no longer a single voice, but a chorus, sometimes dissonant, sometimes harmonious, always human. Its greatest strength has never been perfection. It survived empires because it was carried by ordinary people, by those who believed something greater than fear existed, by those who forgave when vengeance was easier. The message that began with Jesus was never about power. It was about transformation, interchange before outer control. History shows a pattern. Whenever the church sought dominance, it weakened. Whenever it returned to humility, it endured. The future is uncertain. Technology reshapes how people connect. Belief competes with endless voices. Tradition struggles against speed. But the core question remains the same as it was 2,000 years ago. Who is Jesus? Not as doctrine, not as institution, but as a person. That question continues to divide, to inspire, to challenge. The church began with no buildings, no army, no political support. Only a story, a death, and a claim that death did not win. Whether believed or not, that claim shaped the world, and the story is still being written.